Alan Zweibel, original Saturday Night Live writer and Thurber Prize-winning author of The Other Showman, says, "The Adventures of Spike the Wonder Dog is so smart, witty, and inventive that I had to keep reminding myself that I didn't write it."
More than almost anybody else, I think we could say that we all worship Sinatra, but he actually liked Bill Boggs. He knew Bill, and he really. I know, but how many of I can't say that. Mr. Schwartz certainly can't say that. Jim Kaplan, much as I love him, can't say that. Of all the people to talk about Sinatra these days, he's one of the few that can actually make that claim. Maybe Tony O, but hardly anybody. Maybe oh, what's the name of that agent that wrote the book? I forget. But anyhow, very few people actually knew him and actually had a warm and cordial relationship with him. Not that he wasn't, a warm and cordial guy, but Bill is one of the few who knows what that's like to actually to be able to say that. So, do you want to start? I mean, I know you've told it so many times, but the 500 Club story is such a great story that it'd be a shame not to use this opportunity, to take this opportunity and not tell it. So,
okay, well, a little bit on my background. I grew up in Philadelphia, Northeast Philadelphia, and in our home, both my father and mother loved music. And my mother had been, and was the 1 year actually older than Sinatra, was an original Bobby Sox. She saw Frank from the very beginning and loved Sinatra. So one of the great pleasures of my life many years later was introducing my mother to Frank. But anyway, it was 1960. I was working at a resort in Ocean City, New Jersey, which is 10 miles south of Atlantic City. And Sinatra was coming to perform at Skinny D'Amato's 500 Club. As legend would have it, Skinny D'Amato really stood by Frank during the down year and a half, 2 years that he had. At that period of time, he was in Philadelphia. My mother went to see him on a Wednesday night with 18 people in the audience. Things were not good for Frank, but Skinny stood by him. And so to help Skinny, make some big bucks, every summer during a period of time, Frank, who was not performing around a lot in 1960, recording movies, Vegas, but not concertizing. So everybody wanted to see this show. The Philadelphia Inquirer said this is the hardest reservation to get in the world. The ticket would have been, another way, but it was really, you didn't get tickets, you got a reservation. So I took it upon myself. I said, I have to see this. I have to see Frank Sinatra. So ironically, the year of Ocean's 11. So I organized a caper wherein I and my coworker, Dave Fixler, dressed as busboys because we found out from people who at our hotel what I said, if you're going to see Sinatra tonight, tell me what the busboys wear. Why? Just tell me. They come back and the busboys were wearing white jackets, black pants, black bow ties. So it's our busboys at our place. So we get dressed up as busboys and drive over to Atlantic City. I parked the car. It was like a slightly drizzly night. And the plan is we're going to walk in the back door of the 500 Club. There's an alleyway and there's a lot of garbage cans around. And walk right down that alleyway, opened up a screen door. Kitchen is going nuts. First thing I saw was like two guys washing dishes like crazy. Then there's waiters like this and bars and stuff. And we just walked right through, just like we belonged there, came out into what was the big lobby area. Oh, but there were 3 shows, a 9, an 11, and a 1. So we deemed that we would go to the 11 o'clock show. So we literally pulled into the back door at about 10 of 11. We see these people like going nuts trying to get through a doorway over there. We figured, well, that must be where the show is. And we just, like we know where we're going, come into what was called I believe, the Vermilion Room of the 500 Club. And folks, first question for you, what do you think was going on in that room 5 minutes before 11, 5 minutes before what we thought was going to be showtime? the last guests from the 9 o'clock show were leaving. So now we're in the 500 Club. We're in the showroom. There's a stage up there. And we look around and say, holy geez, this is going to take a while. What are we going to do? So we look like busboys. We spoke the same language that busboys spoke back then, English. And so, boom. And so we just started to work. We literally started to set up tables. We were moving things around, nobody, the whole time, no one came up to us and said, who are you guys, right? And then the room gradually filled up. And at the appropriate time, we went to a pillar, which was not far from the stage. I would say 20, 22 feet from the stage. There was this pillar. We dropped our jackets, put on long ties, so we looked like customers suddenly, and just stood there hoping that everything was going to be okay. And the comedian, not Jackie Vernon, I've forgotten this guy's name, but anyway, comes out and the crowd has gone completely nuts, completely crazy, laughing, drinking. And this is the first time I was ever in a nightclub. There's men with giant cufflinks, plunging dresses on the women. We're looking around, I was a 17-year-old kid, right? I thought, and I remember distinctly thinking, how is anybody going to sing to these people? So Buddy Lester gets off stage, and then bum, 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 and Sinatra comes out. So you met somebody who set you back on your heels. Goody, goody. And the audience is like this. And for the hour of the show, he was doing 3 shows, so he wasn't doing the long concert shows. He had that audience in the palm of his hand. I mean, literally, I'm not embarrassed to say it. That night, I just fell in love with Sinatra. I thought, this is phenomenal what this man is doing. And when he sang, "You Go to My Head," now I could feel it. I thought, wow, he's experiencing these emotions. And so from that point forward, I just took it upon myself to go see Sinatra as often as I could. And from that July date in 1960 until some point in mid-1994 in Atlantic City at the Sands, I saw Frank, by my own count, 85 times. Yes, Jane? Go to Las Vegas story meeting? Mm-hmm. Well, that's a long story. So that story, see, here's the thing. I have a coach. She's not supposed to be my coach. It's my beloved girlfriend, Jane Rothschild. So anyway, well, that's what happened to me. I fell in love with Frank that night. And the only coda to the story, which I don't always mention, is that we went back to Ocean City and all the other teenagers and college students are working there. Nobody believed us that we actually did it. So man, we got the jackets out. We got other jackets. We got a camera. We went back the next night and we took pictures.
Yeah, you have the pictures. I know, right?
I have pictures. Ultimately, well, I had the pictures of Dean, and I have pictures of we have pictures of when Dean and Frank were there. So that's my big long 500 story. But that really is my introduction to Frank. That's the way it happened.
Wow. And then you went more than one night. You took pictures. You took pictures at the Anti-Defamation League concert, the Italian.
I always was taking pictures of Frank. And this is when you had to actually take cameras in there. And the Anti-Defamation League concert, you mean the Italian-American Anti-Defamation?
Right. Not the Jewish Anti-Defamation, right?
That was a great show. I actually got tickets for that with my friend John Helsa. It was at Madison Square Garden, and we ended up insinuating ourselves all the way down to the stage. This is bold moves, And when the show was over, we just hung around. And finally, when not too many people were around, I picked up the folding chair that Sinatra had been sitting on and took it home. Still happens. I know.
I didn't remember that. That you didn't sell. That you still have, right?
Will, I'm going to give it to you.
That you have it bronzed, right?
Well, the chair's in East Hampton. I'm giving you the chair.
Oh my goodness, the Frankie chair. Wow.
Absolutely.
Well, he was the chairman of the board, so that's appropriate.
There he goes again.
Oh my gosh. That is I mean, we both had this obsession with Sinatra. I saw him compared to you. As Jane might say, I'm a mere pisher. I saw him maybe 12 times, between 1983. It was the same tour as the Concert for the Americas, and Buddy Rich was the band and the opening act. And that was the only time I got to see Buddy Rich. And then I saw him about at least once or twice a year up until the last tour, the last time he played New York. And you saw him all over. You saw him in Atlantic City, New York, Las Vegas.
One of the most notable times I saw Frank was at the Newport Jazz Festival. The only
That's
time
right. You told me in '65.
This was great. It was '65, the same year that the terrific first live album, Sinatra to Sands, was recorded. And my great friend, Jody Anthony, I'd love for you to meet this guy sometime. He's just my great friend, met him first day in the Army. He's the one I go visit in Italy once a year. We said, we're going to go to Newport Jazz Festival. So in the middle of summer, I took a day off from my job at Armstrong, and we drove up there, and it was a huge outdoor show. You know, I didn't see Frank too often in daylight, you know. Outdoor show, and I don't remember who the openings were, but the exciting part of this appearance was that a helicopter, there's a stage, right? Behind the stage, this helicopter approaches and lands, and the helicopter lands, the basic band starts out, dum, 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 doing the intro to get me to the church on time. And Sinatra.
I'm getting married. The Billy Byers arrangement.
Yeah. And it comes out and opens with I'm getting married. Whoa, blew the place away. It was a great show. Great show.
The amazing thing about that year, that was the Sinatra 50th birthday year. And I actually, as Bill knows, my most recent book is about Nat King Cole. And
great book, folks.
Not long after Nat died, they had this concert that he recorded this concert in 1960, and they sat on it. Nat had so much product, you know, in the pipeline that they didn't release it until after he died. And when that album came out, now Ella Fitzgerald had done tons of live albums already. Mel Torme, Judy Garland, Tony Bennett did the famous Carnegie Hall. But I personally think it was the Nat Cole album that pushed Frank to do it. And that combined with the 50th birthday, I think that he thought, because Nat Cole had done Live at the Sands, Frank decided to do Live at the Sands, but he was going to do it even better. He was competing with Nat, you know, posthumously, and he decides to do this album at the Sands. And not only that, it's going to be a live album with Count Basie. And he doesn't just prepare for the album. He literally spends almost the whole year on the road with Basie. They do a tour in the spring, they do a tour in the summer, they tour again in the fall. Finally, around the time of the birthday in December, they get together at the Sands, and he tapes a whole week and puts it out. And it turns out to be worth the trouble, because that album is one of the great Sinatra albums, one of the great live albums, and it was a double album that was on the best-selling charts for like forever. So it was a real cash cow for him. But that, and you also saw him, and so the Newport Jazz Festival was part of that lead-in to the Sands album, and you also saw him at Flushing, right?
Well, yes, saw him a couple of times at the
but the '65 tour where he played the tennis court with Basie, you were there. So was Carrie Hoffman.
And the opening was Oscar Peterson. I know, come on.
Not too shabby, right?
It was a brilliant, hot July, when it was summer night. And I went with a woman I was dating and my mother. The three of us went. We had to take the subway out. By the time we got there on a hot subway, and the seats were good, not great, but good seats, up one tier, looking at Frank. And the night of that show, when he launched into the song, which is on the live album, Don't Worry About Me, with that long, don't worry about me, I'll get along. the whole audience literally melted, Will, melted. Beautiful show.
There's a version of Easy to Remember, the Rodgers and Hart song.
Oh, what a gorgeous song.
Well, he did it with the string quartet on Close to You, and then 10 years later, he does it with Basie, but he doesn't put it on the record. I don't think he even did it at the Sands. He did it at Newport, and I think he did it at Flushing. And one of the tragedies of the Newport concert is, even though there's lots of great audio from the Newport Jazz Festival, nobody's found a good tape of that. It's just audience tapes that sound pretty lousy, that are not worth issuing. But wow, what an incredible year. In June, Sinatra, before Newport, Sinatra appears, he does this benefit for Dismas House, where he brings out Sammy Davis Jr. and Dean Martin. And this is considered the last real appearance of what was already being called the Rat Pack. And even though they never billed themselves as that, but it's an incredible year, 1965. And one of the reasons I think he decides that the Rat Pack is receding into the past is because now that he's 50, he gets a little bit more, he thinks that, this is the next phase in his life, particularly in terms of the Basie tour. But that's a singularly great concert, the Rat Pack concert from 1965.
I always like the Basie shows with strings.
Yeah.
There was a period of time, and I heard it was literally to save money on the road. I have this friend, Peter Bonconsiglio, who always played in the string section. And it could have just been because he was pissed off, but he said, the no strings at Carnegie Hall this year. We're just, I think it was Carnegie Hall. We're just using the band, and so they'd be having the reeds playing the string part, but it wasn't exactly when Sinatra was at the Uris Theater, Will, in 1975. Now the Gershwin Theater. He did something theatrically there. Frank didn't do much theatrically. He came out, he sang. There were lighting cues, right? But he opened the show with a couple of up-tempo numbers, and then as he introduced the string section, a screen that you couldn't see through, a light screen, went up, and there's an entire string section in the Basie band. And it was just a magical moment, The other theatrical device that I saw Frank do, well, just at his retirement show. I actually was there for that retirement show at the not the Carter Barron Amphitheater, at the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion.
Oh, in 71, yeah.
He ended with Angel Eyes.
Right, and the follow spot, yeah.
Oh, God. I had read about Frank doing that, but I had never seen it, where he would sing Angel Eyes, just basically what is called a pin spot on his face. And the very end is, excuse me while I disappear. Black. That was a great, so just a couple little things like that.
Very literal, but brilliant. So I got asked to do a talk at Berkeley, highly prestigious, the Berkeley Institute of Music.
They let me on the campus.
They didn't let me on the campus either. I did it via Zoom. They said you can do the talk as long as you don't come here. That's a part of the deal. And it's all, obviously music students. And a young gal asked me, I was talking about some aspect of Sinatra. She said, well, what do you think? I mean, what was Sinatra thinking when he did this? Or what was, what did he have in mind when he tried that? And I said, the most direct answer is, we do not know, because Sinatra never told anybody. He never talked about it. And he's not alone in that. I mean, Sinatra hardly ever gave any interviews. And the few he did, he mostly told old Tommy Dorsey stories, which is great, but he almost never talked about his process. And even though somebody like Louis Armstrong, who loved to talk, Louis was a great, you talked to him, he loved to tell old stories, and Louis loved to go on talk shows and tell what he was thinking, but he almost, people of that generation, and considering Sinatra and Louis as the same generation, which is kind of a stretch, but they almost never talked about process. They never talked about methodology. So I had to tell her, Jim Kaplan and other Chuck Granada, I mean, we've anatomized Sinatra's life down almost to the hour. We know where he was every day of his life and what he did every day of his life, but we really don't know what he was thinking. We can conjecture based on the results, based on the consistency, but we really don't know what he was thinking. And that's one of the reasons that your interview is so valid. And I know you, and actually, here's something that also occurred to me. There's an interview with Nat Cole where he also uses a baseball analogy. One of many things they had in common was that they both were huge baseball fans, and they would both, interrupt a concert or a game or a recording session to go to a ball game. And Nat Cole also said, yeah, you gotta, and he compared it to pitching, the same as Sinatra does in this interview. So with your permission, I thought maybe you would show that little baseball analogy clip where you have artfully intertwined a few clips as well, if you think.
Yeah. This is from my talk, Memories of Sinatra. And
all right. Well, here we go. Oh, I got to start the thing. Hold on. I got to start. Wait. Here we go. So, and I have to do this. Just one little thingy here. And I got to do this. Wait, that's not it. VLC, that's it.
Well, while you're doing that,
yes,
I'll just speak while you're getting this set up, but let me know. So one of the things, almost anytime I interviewed a successful singer or actor, but particularly with singers and actors, I like talking to them about process. You can't really get actors telling you too much about their process, but one of the things I just said, Frank, take me through your ritual that you do before a show. And he described that. And at the Euros, he was opening with Where or When. And so I said, is that your opening number because of the meaning of the song? That it seems like we've been together before and remaking that connection with the audience of Where or When, which seems like a logical question. And he shook his head and said, yeah, he said, I can see that, but one reason I like it is that it's a song that starts out, it seems we stood and low, and ends big. I get to run through my range while I'm doing that. He also said, I know like in the first minute that I'm on stage, I'm walking around, I walk from one side of the stage to the other side of the stage because people are looking at me. They're more than, they're just, hey, they're taking me in. And he said, if another thing about process, if I'm on stage and I see a couple coming in late, coming down the aisle, I'll move away from that part of the stage to the other part of the stage to redirect people toward me. That's all in the interview. That's
incredible. All right, here we go. This is great.
There's a man, Count Basie, who is successful because of his
Sorry, I got the wrong. Wait, I'll play this part anyhow. Then we'll get to the bit.
Economy of style. The fact that he doesn't overdo anything.
I believe in economy. I absolutely believe in economy and
I
performance.
think we need more volume.
I cannot
Yeah.
stand to watch a performer expend every ounce of energy and every emotion that he or she has on the stage, every performance. I cannot stand it. It drives me crazy. You must save something. There has to be something that you
It's almost
save.
like a good, I have used this analogy in discussing you before. It's almost, seeing Frank Sinatra is like going to a fine restaurant where at the end of the meal you wish you had had just a little bit more. Seeing many other performers is like a weekend at Mama Leone's.
Well, that's true. Some of the kids tire me out too. The ones who with all of the it's necessary. They have choreography, and I'm talking now primarily about a lot of the gals who work today in Vegas. They get on stage, and I begged Sammy, for instance, for years to be more economical when he performs. He just doesn't hear me. He just never listens. I keep saying to him, we love you. Everybody loves you. You don't have to keep saying to them, love me a little more. But because they do love him. They absolutely adore him, But he'll stay on until you almost want to say to him, you've got another show to do. Or maybe 3 shows in one night. And it was up to Sammy. He'd do 4 shows a night, you know, if he could handle it.
If you had to look back.
That's an interesting situation to stop and talk about for a minute. You oftentimes, I find myself oftentimes thinking like a baseball pitcher when I'm performing.
Really?
I will turn around and say to Bill Miller, skip the next 2 tunes and go to the 3rd one, because there's something about the audience that's not, I'm not getting any vibes from anybody. So we'll go to something that might grab them a little bit more. And in short, you throw a knuckler, and you throw a slider, and you throw a fastball. And that way, it kind of, it not only amuses them and entertains them, but it mystifies them a little bit. They don't quite understand why there's switches, big switches like that.
All right, so here's a curve.
Oh, we knew Joe Bushkin, and yeah, he did wind up in the clink a few times. Oh, by the way, there's an image. The gentleman there, we're talking about Sinatra imitators for the event on Tuesday, and that is the legendary Duke Hazlitt, who was a full, he was the only, I mean, he was the first full-time Sinatra impersonator who was working from the mid-50s up until, I don't know, like 10 years ago, maybe. He's still with us.
He also did Crosby, which I never saw. When I saw Frank at the 500 Club, and the story I was telling you at the beginning, that night he said, by the way, if you like that guy down the street, Frank says, referring to Duke Hazlitt, you're going to love me.
Oh, wow. And he was working there at the same time in Atlantic City. Oh, that's terrific.
Yes.
I'll use that on Tuesday. If you don't tell it, I will. That's a great story.
Use the Steve Allen clip. The Steve Allen clip is phenomenal. You know,
that is amazing, you know.
It's a great piece of live television. You know, just seeing Frank sing those 3 songs. You know when Frank died, there were all kinds of tributes, but I love what Steve Wynn said. Steve Wynn said, because of Frank Sinatra, we saw how good the songs could be. And that's, you know, seeing those 3 songs, you know, I couldn't even sit still. I had to get up, you know.
Yeah.
The impact.
Well, that's just it. I mean, how many ways are there to make music? There's composition, there's improvisation, and there's interpretation. I mean, you know, there's gradations and they overflow. But really, Sinatra, more than anything else, he is the embodiment of the art of interpretation, which is to say, taking songs that were already there. He didn't, you know, he gets his name on a few songs, some of which he actually wrote, and some of them are good, like I'm a Fool to Want You. But the whole point is he took great songs and he showed the way how they could be personalized. And, you know, how it's because of Sinatra that, you know, we still sing songs from 100 years ago, Irving Berlin songs from the 20s, you know, Jerome Kern songs even earlier, and they still sound relevant today because of the art of interpretation, because, you know, every generation can take them and make them their own. And Sinatra is the all-time Jedi master of that. He is the guy, you know, the gold standard of, and I've gotten it up to 4 in terms of video, but you know, of course, famously Night and Day, and many other songs too. Sinatra could take the same song at different points in his career and sing it 4 different ways. We have Night and Day as a slow ballad. We have it as a swinging Nelson Riddle arrangement in 1956. We have it as a concert tune with Don Costa with the verse in 1961. And we even have the disco version. And those are just the 4 major arrangements. There's all kinds of other performance too. I mean, the same song, you know, I mean, through the process of interpretation, you know, when Ella Fitzgerald and Tony Bennett and Sinatra all do the same song, or say Ella, Frank, and Mel Torme all did Lady is a Tramp the same year. They all did it in 1956.
Wow.
And it's all 3 versions that might as well be 3 different songs. They're so different from each other. You know, and in fact, one of the things I love about when Ella and Frank do Lady is a Tramp on the 67 Man and His Music Show, well, it is fabulous, but Frank, being a gentleman, does her arrangement. Unlike his arrangement doesn't include the verse, but hers does. I've wined and dined on Mulligan. They do the Ella arrangement rather than the Nelson Riddle arrangement. And but even so, Sinatra doing Night and Day in 1941 is a completely different song from Sinatra doing Night and Day in 1956. He doesn't change the notes. He doesn't, necessarily, I mean, he sings it noticeably faster, but not radically faster. And yet it's a completely different song just by the process of interpretation. And, the two things support each other so well. We would not have this thing that we call the Great American Songbook. There'd be, before Sinatra, even the great songs by George Gershwin and Rodgers and Hart and Cole Porter were thought to be ephemeral. Nobody thought that we'd still be singing Gershwin songs 100 years later, as well respected as he was.
Give a couple examples of that. I always like when you talk about that because it collides with, in my opinion, his work with Nelson Riddle, Swing and Affair, the original ones. Some of the songs that Frank reached back and brought new interpretations to, in an up-tempo way.
I love that. Our Love Is Here to Stay from Swingin' Lovers is so great. Or even, I've Got You Under My Skin. Cole Porter, if you see, it's written for an Eleanor Powell movie, and it's not sung by Eleanor Powell, and Jimmy Stewart is the leading man, that great musical leading man, who actually does a wonderful job in the movie. It's sung by the heavy, the girl who comes in between the leading lady, Eleanor Powell, and the leading man, Jimmy Stewart. It's sung by, what's her name? Gloria Bruce? Virginia Bruce, who's the other woman. She's, this dark, sultry femme fatale, and she sings it slowly and seductively like a bolero, like I've got you under my skin. And it's very seductive. Of course, when Sinatra does it, it's totally different. It's a swing number. It's got a whole different rhythmic feel. It's a solid four, a Count Basie influence solid four, very much. Sinatra and Nelson Riddle were both hugely inspired by the great black swing bands, particularly Count Basie, Duke Ellington in terms of orchestral color, Basie in terms of the solid four tempo, and Jimmy Lunsford in terms of the sort of the relaxed heartbeat feel. The great thing that they learned from Lunsford is that you could swing like crazy without having to go fast. In fact, Ethel Merman can sing at lightning fast tempos, but you wouldn't call her swinging. If the people mistake swing in terms of a rhythmic feel for tempo. I'm saying? It doesn't have to be fast to be swinging. And by the same standard, when we think of Sinatra's jazz albums, we think of Swingin' Lovers and we think of A Swingin' Affair. But really, in the Wee Small Hours, which is slow, everything on it is very slow. That's just as much of a jazz album, a very Billie Holiday inspired album. Even though it's not fast and quote unquote, jazzy or swinging, it is just as much of a jazz album as Songs for Swinging Lovers. You
opened, that was really brilliant, Will. You opened that up by what you just said, by talking about interpretation, and I think that the quality that Sinatra had, that's a mystical quality to me, is so many people would say, I felt like he was just singing to me. I heard my mother say that. I heard friends of my mother say that. I had been executive producer of the Morton Downey Jr. show, and Frank was at Radio City Music Hall in like '87. I got 6 or 8 good seats, like about the 12th row center. And I took the staff of the Morton Downey Jr. show, and we had various ages of people, all younger than I. And that's what they told me. I felt like he was singing to me.
Well, of course he was.
In that quality to convey, and also Sinatra's acting ability, his interpretive skills, which I think with Tony Bennett increased over the years. Sinatra's interpretive skills really gave him the ability to seem to be experiencing what he was singing about. And at the same time, you have the autobiographical element of his life, the fact that he was up, that he was down, that he did come back, that he lost the love of his life. I mean, if you look at with Ava Gardner, the love really never went away.
Yeah, it was too hot not to cool down,
Yeah, precisely.
But you're right. I mean, Sinatra, it's like water seeking its own level. Sinatra could be in Madison Square Garden, and it's still a one-to-one connection. He relates to people on their own level. He never talks down to them, or the phrase I use in the new edition of the book is he never claims to know more. It's not about it's not about wisdom, it's about empathy. His point is, I have lived, I have loved, and I have suffered too. Whatever you've been. Oh, in fact, there's a great clip from a great 33-second clip from your interview where he talks about that. But he's showing people you've suffered and I have too. And I think it's important that he never claims to know more. To me, it's really significant. I think the last line to me, my two favorite desert island albums. By the way, I saw a recent New Yorker cartoon where there's two guys on a desert island listening to records, and one of them says, it would help if, we showed up on this desert island with more than our favorite records, But anyhow, my two favorite, of course, are Wee Small Hours and Songs for Swingin' Lovers. The last song on Wee Small Hours is This Love of Mine, which is one of the few songs that Sinatra actually had a hand in writing. And it ends with the question, I ask the moon above the stars that shine, what's to become of it, this love of mine? It ends with a question. Then the next album, Songs for Swingin' Lovers, ends with How About You, where it's like, I like this, I like that, how about you? In other words, Sinatra's saying, I don't know any more than you do. I've lived and loved and suffered. I've been involved with some beautiful women. I've had my heart broken, but I am just like you. I don't know any more. That's why I say there's no wisdom. He does not claim to be. And I think our friend Bill Zimi wrote a very interesting book where he posed questions to Sinatra like he was an oracle. And while that's an interesting read, I think the whole point of Sinatra is that he's not an oracle. He's just like you and me. When it comes down to it, he's not all of us can say we've had our heart broken by Ava Gardner, but just the same, when you boil it down, he's just like the rest of us. He's lived and loved and suffered. And at the end of it, what's to become of it? He doesn't know. How about you? It's not about me. And I think that's the end of it. I think even though Sinatra, it's funny, Shirley MacLaine, in one of her few books that actually talks about life on planet Earth and her lifetime, she talked about going on the road with Sinatra late in his career, like in the 80s. Yep. And she said that her depiction is really very touching because she describes him, he's sometimes perceived as this raging egomaniac, and I don't think he was that at all. The way she describes him is he would get up and sing before people and he would say, thank you for coming. And he meant it. He was genuinely grateful that people wanted to hear him sing, and he never took it for granted. And I think that's what you're talking about, that he was singing directly to these people. He never put himself above the audience. He was relating to them directly at their own level.
What you just said is apt what Shirley said. By the way, I talked to Shirley backstage at that Radio City Music. He says, one of the reasons I'm doing this, I want to do it while I'm still able, because she did some dancing and so forth. But to your point there on Sinatra, as my mother, who first saw Frank in the 40s all the way through to 1994, started to say about Frank in the late 70s, he's more grateful than ever that people are here. My mother saw something come through Frank one night, if I can remember the sequence, at the Sands in Atlantic City, in the middle of the show, not in the middle of a song, people were applauding, and someone yelled, "We're glad you were here." Huh. And everybody sort of stopped. And Frank said, "I'm glad you're here. I know why you're here, and that's why I'm here." Beautiful. Just like that.
Wow.
it's a really wonderful moment because the screaming, I'm glad you're here. Like, how's Frank going to react? Well, he just
No, he just took it exactly like that, you know.
exactly like that. Yeah, it's
For
true.
all the levels of the man, you know, all the complexities, what you see was what you got. Rosemary Clooney, when Chuck Granada and I interviewed Rosemary about Sinatra, she said that's his great strength is the emotional honesty. You know, he is authentic in the moment. What he's feeling is what what he's communicating, you know?
It's not for this show to do it, but it would be interesting sometime to take that exact point and maybe compare that emotional honesty to other highly successful singers like, say, Streisand and others who seem to approach songs from a different angle.
From a more theatrical perspective, I don't know. But I mean, to me, the difference is I don't want to get started about Streisand, but
I know. It's okay.
no, but I mean, to me,
I just threw that out there.
to me, I mean, the key difference is what people love about Streisand is the ego, the fact that she's almost all of her most compelling songs are about self-glorification in a way. And that's one reason why, you know, you have a great story about talking to Sinatra about My Way. As we all know, Sinatra said almost every time he sang My Way, he apologized for it. And he essentially said, I don't really like this song, but since people seem to like it, I'll sing it. That's essentially what he said every time, you know. And what he didn't like was that it creates this image of Sinatra as this towering ego, which he wasn't. He was happy to play it if it made people happy, but he really wasn't this whole kind of self-aggrandizing thing. And when you look at Barbra Streisand concert videos, she does all these great songs about celebrating the self, about, you know, how I'm me. And that's her whole thing is sort of the self, which is a wonderful thing. It's not my thing in particular. And I think that's the essential difference is Sinatra is really only comfortable singing about love for another human being, usually of the opposite sex. But, and Streisand's whole thing is more about, you know, she's this underdog from Brooklyn who became the greatest star in the world. And that's what she's selling. That's her message. That's her brand. And people love that. People love her for that. It's not, and that's, I don't want to say it's calculated, but that's what people respond to. You know, they like this idea if she can make it, I can, you know what I'm saying? And Sinatra's a completely different thing. It's all about love for somebody else as opposed to this kind of self-love and self-aggrandization, which is valid. I don't want to take that away from her, you know.
You know, there's folks watching now, if you can get to see it, there's a really well done documentary about Dean Martin called The King of Cool. And
you are so great in that.
You too, Will.
Oh, it's mainly the Bill Boggs show, and all the better for it. All the better for it, as far as I'm concerned.
I just point this out because it's such a beautiful show. It's nothing to do with you or me. It's a celebration of Dean Martin, with whom Frank had a tremendously long and a real friendship. And Dean Martin referred to Frank late in his career on stage as Frank Sinatra, the charisma man. The charisma man. And one of the interesting elements about being in Sinatra's physical presence was just that he actually, now of course, you know, hey, it's Frank Sinatra, he's world famous, but I'm telling you, I've been privileged to be with a lot of highly successful so-called charismatic figures. You could feel it coming from Sinatra. I talked to a therapist about this one time. What is that? What is making, some people just have this innate quality of producing energy. And that was, I could sense him behind me. And it wasn't my imagination. He was at this table, I was here, and I could sense him behind me. And that all adds to it. You know, when Frank would come on stage, the times I would see him, there was a sense of, wow, you know, there he is. He's actually there on stage, this so-called legendary. And what I got out of Frank seeing Frank perform so many times was this. If I had to, as a fellow performer, not necessarily a singer, but somebody who is on camera, who gets, I have 6 different stage shows, presentations, talks that I do, was this. The Sinatra had an energy and a charisma with him that actually he projected out to
Right.
people. You could feel him getting to you, whereas with Dino, a brilliant performer, is exactly the opposite. With Dean, he drew you into him like that.
You had to come to him rather than him coming to you.
Yeah, Dean Martin, I mean, this is not to his detriment. He was smart enough to know he was not a guy who would play Madison Square Garden successfully. Maybe in these days, if you had giant screens, but
Right,
if you
right.
walk out in a big venue like that, it wouldn't have worked.
And that's one reason why Dean was more successful on TV. That kind of thing works on TV. Sinatra could do great TV, but not to the quantity that Dean did. He couldn't have done 270-hour-long shows the way Dean did. You know that.
I remember in the 60s, somebody reading an article in the Philadelphia Inquirer comparing, maybe it's the early 70s, Dean and Perry Como and Andy Williams as television personalities had a distinct relaxation.
Right, right.
Whereas Frank, as a television personality, did not have a distinct relaxation. And there was
Yeah.
medium itself. The same with Garland.
Exactly. That's why the Judy Garland show couldn't have possibly worked. She's a fabulous monster, as the French say. You want somebody like Dinah Shore, who's much more low key, somebody who you really want to have in your house every week. And that's why, I mean, I think Garland would have been much more successful on TV if she had done an annual special like Sinatra, or even like one every 3 months, like Bob Hope was doing by the 60s. For her to try to do it every week, not only did it exhaust her physically, but it's just too intense. You don't want that much intensity, every Sunday evening,
There's one performer I wish I had seen, Judy Garland.
Oh, I'm sorry you got to miss her. I'm sorry you didn't. I'm sorry I missed her too. I mean, to me, and I guess we'll wrap up with this thought, but my buddy Jim Burns and I are working on a little, a brief documentary. I'm not sure what the, this is news to Bill, I think, that we're working with I hope Jim doesn't mind that I mention this, with the estate of Jimmy Van Heusen and the estate of Thornton Wilder, big difference, on a brief documentary about the 1955 musical version of Our Town, and which has really never been shown, but that you have to just stay tuned for that. But one point that I always liked about Our Town, and particularly this production of it, was Sinatra and songs by Jimmy Van Heusen and Sammy Cahn.
Not being the stage manager.
As the stage manager, yes.
Paul Newman and
Eva Marie Saint, right, who's still with us in her 90s, as the boy and girl. And the end of the story is Eva Marie Saint as the girl who's since died, and she's gone to the next world. She comes back, and she wants to experience life again for a day, and she finds it's just too overwhelming, and that you can't possibly process life in the moment like that. You can't appreciate it. And she turns to the stage manager and says, does anybody really, appreciate life every moment? And it's hard to say this without breaking down, but Sinatra says, as the stage manager says, maybe poets and saints, which is a great line.
That is a good line. Well, good luck with that project, Will.
Well,
Go ahead.
The poets and saints, of course, we know Sinatra is a poet. And these days when we describe somebody as a saint, we usually mean somebody like Mother Teresa or Albert Schweitzer, somebody that does hugely good works in the world. Of course, Sinatra did that too. But really, the traditional Catholic theological definition of a saint is somebody who creates miracles. If you can prove that such and such a person created a miracle in the eyes of the Catholic Church, then they get canonized as a saint. And to Bill and myself, and to anybody that heard him, Sinatra created a miracle every time he opened his mouth.